Sa, we both belong to a seminar called CLIL seminar at ICESI, and we have been working on how to implement EMI, English, EMI courses, English courses with the methodology of English as a medium of instruction, specifically CLIL, that is content and language integrated learning. So we have implemented this at ICESI. So we made this group in order to talk about this issue and to do research. So welcome to our presentation, and I hope you find this useful for your institutions and for your own. Okay, so you can move. You got it. So let's do this. Carlos is coming. Carlos, welcome. So let's do the following thing. We would like you to read the following text. Just take a minute. Okay, so now we would like you to answer questions in Mentimeter. So Samir, I think you need to share that in the chat so they can go straight there and try to answer the questions, okay?
Give me a second.
No worries.
I don't know if it's necessary to do it in a Menti because we only got 2 people, but here we go. If you want to do it.
Or if you have the questions, we can show the questions and they can answer. Is that the questions there?
Yes.
Okay, so go move on. Okay, these are the questions.
So we have 2 questions. What are the characteristics of this text, the one that you just read? Or what type of a text is it? And the second question is, write an adjective to describe your comprehension of the text. You can speak, or you can write your answers in the chat if you want. You can do it in Menti as well.
Don't worry about Menti. So let's go to this one. So the first question is, what are the characteristics of this text? What type of text is this? You can talk or you can text. What type of text is chat? You can text here in our chat.
So the question is about this text, the one that you just tried to read. What type of a text is it, or what characteristics does the text have? You can write simple words. You don't have to write
Let's give an options. Is that a narrative text? What type of text is it? Oh, descriptive medical research. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, what else?
Tani, I don't know if you came in the right moment or if you came in late. The question here is, when you see this text that's on the screen, what kind of a text is it for you? How would you describe that text in a couple of words?
Nicholas too.
Nicholas too.
You can talk or you can write in our chat. Okay, so Carlos says descriptive medical research. So if you want, you can have it like a presentation mode so we can move on and the rest can participate along with it. So we have the two questions, number one and number two has to do with the understanding of the text. Oh, descriptive that Fanny just texted.
Thank you, Fanny. Okay.
And can you recall the second question, Samir?
Yes, the second question is if you had to use one or two adjectives to describe your experience of reading this text, what would they be? You can write them in the chat or you can say them out loud. One or two adjectives to describe your experience of reading a text like this.
For example, confusion, scientific, I don't know, any word that comes to your mind. Confusing, easy to get. Okay, just move on. I know they'll participate soon. Don't be shy. Okay, so what happened in this reading experience? Question was, oh, we have confused and analytical. Thanks, Fanny. Was your knowledge of the English language sufficient to fully understand the text and more, to feel that you can really understand the main message or get something from there? Was your English sufficient? How do you feel reading that? You can talk because we're just a few, so that would be nice to interact. Not too well, Fanny, but Fanny says. Yeah, no, not too well, she says. The rest? Come on, don't worry, don't be shy. How do you feel reading? Can you go back to the text, Samir, so they can see how do you feel when you read that text? Okay, Fanny, thanks. Fanny has no mic, so, but the rest, come on. How do you feel? Like in my introduction, I want to start doing it spiritism. Okay, go ahead. Don't worry, we're gonna get on the topic. Go on. Okay, so look, this is very important when we talk about academic discourse. So first of all, students usually, I mean, there's a development in terms of how students would start a university program, experience this introduction to academic discourse. So first, for university education, mainly is focused on EFL, general academic development. So of course, at schools, students actually, I mean, depends on the schools and levels that they come with, they have certain level of English, and even more, the courses that they study at the university, I mean, the programs that they study, they focus on more EFL general, you know, English and develop academic, I mean, but not focus on certain disciplines. So when students come, and not only in English, we talk about Spanish. Students, they when they come to university, they speak Spanish, they write, they read, but when they enter into the universe of the academic discipline, there's some aspects that actually become very important now in the learning process. Number one, what are the characteristics of the academic discourse? Is discipline-specific social practices. I mean, we're talking about that when you start a program, you start interacting, you start expressing yourself, producing, yes, within a specific discipline-specific social practices. I mean, people start developing certain ways of thinking, writing, reading, etc., that belong to a certain community of practice. Another characteristic is the academic discourse is discipline-specific beliefs and attitudes. I mean, when you study as a sociologist or you are economist, there are other things that become very important in that community that has to do with certain beliefs and attitudes towards knowledge, towards the reality, towards the environment. So you usually find a sociologist have a type of discourse that to relate to his or her reality. And when you find an engineer, you can tell those differences. I mean, there is a way that they approach to reality through the academic discourse that brings certain beliefs and attitudes as well. On the other side, they need to be become familiar with discipline-specific conventions. I mean, there's a way of writing, talking, thinking in this discipline. That's what you could tell in that text. That text, when you get to that text, there's a type of way those articles are written, the ideas presented, and there's a way to approach to it as well. And obviously, there is a specific language universe. That means that when students start developing academic discourse, they start becoming insiders. I mean, they are outsiders of the discipline, of this community of practice. And in order to become insiders, they need to develop this discourse. If they don't do that, it's going to be very hard for them to succeed in that scenario, that context. That's the reason why, like when you actually, in Spanish, there is a process to do that. So imagine this in English. So it's like, how can we, in this university education, students can develop this competence? And that's a challenge that we're going to show you further. So in this case, we're looking for students to really make meaning in a specific disciplinary field. And that's the key, whether there's in Spanish or in English, that's something that they need to develop throughout the process.
There's one more idea there, the distinction between EFL, English as a foreign language, and EAL, English as an additional language. So here in EFL, the focus is mostly general communication needs. But when you get to the universe, or even when you get to the specific universe of being part of a disciplinary community, you need to do more than just communicate generally in English, right? So you go to the airport, you go to the restaurant, etc. That's general English, but here you need to do specific things, like Johnny says, to belong to that community. So it's not just general English, but it's almost like Johnny said, it's a way of thinking and it's a way of being. A sociologist has a way of thinking, a way of being, and they express this way of thinking and way of being. Well, they construct that idea and they also express it through a language, whether it's Spanish or English. So here, if we're thinking about an additional language, whether it be English, French, Portuguese, whatever the language may be, the relationship there is much more profound. And this is what helps them become like an insider in that profession. Okay, we're going to continue. 1 second.
Go ahead. Okay, Highland, 2019, he gives this idea of academic discourse. He says academic discourses are closely bound to the social activities, cognitive styles, and epistemological beliefs or particular disciplinary communities. The ways community members understand knowledge, what they take to be true, and how they believe such truths are arrived at, are all instantly in a community's discourse conventions. These conventions connect texts with disciplines through linguistic choices, which galvanized support for the writer, express collegiality, and negotiate disagreement. So this is the key. I mean, once you get immersed into this community, the way, number one, especially to so everyone agree what is true and what is not, or what is actually part of how they create this reality. I mean, how they construct the reality is connected through this. And academic literacy, which is, he wants to go more specific on this, is a way of conceptualizing and influencing teaching and learning by radically rethinking literacy to take account of the cultural and contextual components of reading and writing. It frames language as discourse practices, the ways in which language is used in particular contexts, rather than a set of discrete skills. And this is very important because sometimes we confuse, I mean, we believe that, I think I can say, and that's something that is problematic, that students, when they, for example, when they're learning English for a specific purpose, is that they need to learn, number one, certain set of skills for reading. Yeah, skimming, scanning, understanding main idea, which is part of it. I'm not saying that it's not part of that. Or vocabulary, technical vocabulary. Yes, that's part of that, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is like students, when they're reading English, they're able to understand that the way the ideas are presented in this discipline are part of a logic, I mean, of communication, of understanding, and of creating knowledge. So, for example, when you get students to read an article, is why do we use certain conventions to write this article? Why do we use short sentences? Why do we start with this type of expressions? More than the expression is why. What is the cognitive process? What is the way of constructing knowledge that is beyond that? So when we talk about discourse, we talk about practices, more than just the lexical, the grammatical, the linguistic component, which is important, but we go beyond. That's where pragmatics, social linguistics comes, and is very important to understand. So it's a more complex work, more than just learning certain words and developing certain set of skills, which is important, but it's being part of this discourse, like they do in the Spanish. So now I want to share quickly here. Well, we want to talk about what we have been doing at ICESI, because we have A levels of English. I mean, at ICESI, we have in our institutional project, we have something that is called English across the curriculum. English is a cross-curriculum competence. And the idea is the students, every single student, they have to study A levels of English. But something that we believe is very important in order to not only develop the communicative competence, but to allow students to develop the academic discourse, is to really have them use English in their disciplinary courses. I mean, if they study engineering, the point is that they can, in one course, they can do something with the language and they can really start working there to develop the academic discourse. So like we've been doing this for about 3 years. We have been working with teachers from different courses at the university. So in order to think how, for example, if he or she uses an article in English, which is very common at universities, and they ask students to read it, we work with them to show how that experience of reading this text can help students to develop academic discourse. So what we usually do at the university is like we negotiate with these teachers and with the program directors and heads of the departments. And we said, okay, let's get to know your courses. How, for example, which courses favor the use of academic discourse? So, for example, they say, no, in this course they have to read because most of the information or is very important for this. So what we do with teachers is that we find out where is English very important and the development of academic discourse key. Then we do a characterization of the courses. I mean, we identify, for example, where are they focusing the most? For example, interpretation of text, production of text, meaning text, in this case, oral or written text. And with them, we sit down and we find out how we can like set a path to develop the academic competence throughout the whole program. So we start from first semesters to the last. And as we move on, complexity, I mean, it becomes more complex. Students need to use language in different skills. For example, speak oral production, writing. So in the first semesters, they get familiar with the academic context. And as they move on, they will start using more the academic disciplinary discourse, which is more specific in terms of their programs. So we work with these teachers that we're going to call content teachers, and they receive training with like giving some basis on CLIL, which is a content language integrated learning, where they learn some methodologicals and theoretical background, information to understand how to do this. But they work with someone else. They work with a language teacher. And this is what we do here. Because according to literature, when they implement these EMI courses, English as a medium of instruction courses around the world, content teachers, the teachers in charge of those subjects, they have problems to do it, because first they consider that they're not language teachers, number one. They are not able to organize or to design the activities in a way that helps students really develop the competence. So they work with language teachers at ICESI. We work together because I'm part of that. And we together negotiate and think how to design activities with what they already have, articles, videos, or whatever, and the objectives that they have for the courses. And besides, they work with the language teacher, they work with the EL Center, which is a center that we have to help students in different areas. And so we design at the EL Center something that we call active paths, which are activities that students need to do before engaging to the main one, like pre-activities. And they work with monitors at the EL Center, and we help them develop and practice. We implement the path, in the program. And the idea at this point is that we're going to start the implementation in a systematic way with industrial engineering. And we hope that by next year we can implement, we can do the implementation. We have done some pilots. Then we assess the competence, what happens with students in that process, so we can come back and improve the whole thing. So it's challenging. There's several things that are challenging about this. So that's the next slide, so we can talk about those challenges. Number one, I'm sorry. Yeah. You can share it. Yeah. Yes. Okay. There are fears. That content language teachers have difficulties to interact and to collaborate. Number one is, as I say, content teachers believe that they're not language teachers. So they say, no, I'm not able to do that. But language teachers as well, the English teachers who work with them, they also feel that, number one, these content teachers would not work with them or not really, how can you say it, recognize that language teachers have certain knowledge that will be useful for what they're doing. Because they told us in a focus group, it's like language teachers have been, we have positioned ourselves as kind of technicians of the language. So we just teach English, and in English is not like another real subject. And that's something that Timar actually has been talking about for a long time, where he says a musician knows about, theory of music. A mathematician has knows about math and everything that has to do with math. And when they ask teachers, English teachers, what is your field? What is our stuff? So some people say English. How about linguistics? How about social linguistics? So that's one thing that they're afraid of. Time constraints. Of course, everyone's busy. Content teacher says, I have no time for this, because it implies doing more work, designing. So that's something that we need to overcome at first. So we found a way to kind of reduce that anxiety and stress and everything that causes like the first interaction is instead of saying that, oh, you're the content teacher and I'm the English teacher, and you tell me what you're looking for, and I'm here to help you like develop it, and I do the activity, the funny activity, all this stuff. Instead of having that division between English and academic content, we said, hey, we have a common ground to start working. We both are dealing with academic language, with academic discourse. I mean, we both are language teachers. That's what we tell them. When we meet for the first time, we say, hey, we are language teachers. You are a language teacher. They say, how come? I'm not an English teacher. You teach language. You develop academic language in your course. You do it in Spanish all the time. Now you're going to do it in English. So when we do that, we set a common ground to start negotiating. So now he's not going to see me just like the English teacher who's going to give me English to my subject, but instead they're going to say, now we need both think how we're going to develop academic discourse. And it has worked. When we work with teachers, and you see now when Samir shows you a little bit about the results of our research that we just did, we found interesting things about this. And of course, there's something that is actually part of the title of this talk is disciplinary boundaries. Every person in that relation, the content teacher positions himself within the expert of his disciplinary field. And the interesting thing that we're going to show as part of the results of research is if he allowed or not to cross certain boundaries. I mean, to get involved in terms of what language is about. I mean, language matters, and how the language teacher was able to cross that boundary and start like dealing or negotiating all about the field that belongs more to the content teacher. So that's very interesting to see during this presentation. So we'll see in a minute. Yes, okay. So Samir will explain this. That is part of the research that we just did.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. So when we started, we started implementing the CLIL courses, the cursos E, like we call them at DCSE, but simultaneously or in a parallel fashion, we started this research group as well to understand more about what's happening, how to do this, what other people are doing, what other people are saying about this. And one of the things that caught our attention a lot was about how content teachers feel about this. Like what are their perceptions about this type of systematic collaboration with a language teacher to introduce this idea of academic discourse, or to help students develop this academic discourse. And we found this model, which is very interesting. The authors here talk about two activity systems. So there's a content activity system and there's a language activity system. And they both have their own specific tools, rules, communities, etc. But when they come together in this collaboration that Johnny just described, that there's this potential for creating a new whole, which is a combination of the content universe and the language universe, which is what we're kind of aiming for, which we're thinking about academic discourse, which is talking about the content subject, or writing about it, or speaking about it, or listening about it, or thinking about that, but in this new additional language, that idea, well, not new, but additional language. So when the activity systems come together, the authors, Moore, Pleutner, and Deal, we're thinking about this idea of how much each individual in this collaborative experience, the content and the language teacher, how much they tend to either safeguard and sort of gatekeep their own boundaries, or how much they overlap and go into the other activity system. And this is what we were interested in discovering in terms of the validation of what we were doing. There's many things that we need to discover about our own experience, student impact, other things, etc. But one of the first things that we addressed was this idea of content teacher perceptions. So taking this model into consideration as a basis, we did our research, which is we interviewed the content teachers. And we asked them, it was a semi-structured interview, and we asked them specific questions about how they felt, what they did with their partner, the language partner, etc. And we then transcribed those interviews, analyzed those interviews, and we discovered like a pattern, or well, a continuum, a pattern, different things happening there. This continuum is what came out of that research. This is what we have created at ICESI. And some of the parameters, so if you look in the column on the left, the gray area, those are like the constant categories that came up in the interviews that we were analyzing. And along the lines here, you have like a continuum. So on the left, you have content teachers who maintain very strict boundaries of being content teachers, and they don't step out of their own universe to explore this new amalgamation of content and language. And on the very right, where you have emerging shared space, that is a little bit like this space here, where the content teacher suddenly sees their own discipline with different eyes. They understand this whole new universe associated with language and their content there, and they're willing to think about the combination of the two into a new whole. So for example, we have ideas like content teacher positioning. For example, here in the strict boundaries column, the content teacher says, I'm the content teacher only, you deal with the language, or the student, it's the student's responsibility to do stuff with language. That's not my responsibility. Whereas on the other extreme, we have people viewing this as an enriching experience. So some of the teachers said, I'd never thought about this before. I mean, I thought it was just about going to class and teaching in English, or getting students to read stuff in English. But I'd never thought about how the experience needs to be scaffolded, systematically planned, included, etc. So they saw opportunities there which the other extreme didn't. Johnny was talking about this in the challenges, this idea of recognition of the CLIL coach's epistemological authority. The CLIL coach is a language partner. So again, there's this idea of language teachers only teach language, or they have fun in language classes, or they play games, or they do silly things, basically. They're not serious, that idea. But in this research, from the comments that the content teachers made in the interviews, we discovered this idea of a whole spectrum of beliefs as well. So the ones who were interested in this new elaboration of content and language valued the pedagogical expertise or the didactic expertise that the language teacher brought with them, because the language teacher made them see things they hadn't seen before. Whereas on the other extreme, there was very little attention to that. It was like, I'm the content teacher, this is what I do, you do your language stuff, whatever it is, like that idea. So in the same line, there's this idea of how much pedagogical discussion there was with the language partner. Like here it says none, and here it says a lot, or very frequent. In the same line of thinking, pedagogical focus, in the strict boundaries, what the professors were looking for quick ideas, because they had literature materials in English, and they didn't know exactly how to cope with them, or students were complaining, or their course evaluation was low, things like that. So they wanted quick fixes to get things, working very quickly. On the other extreme, there was more like a transformation in their pedagogy, thinking, wow, okay, I never thought about this. This is a new way of doing things. I need to take this into account. And in line with that, this is where the new resources were designed, the CLIL learning resources, like Johnny said, the active paths. The active path is like a workshop or a route of learning, basically. Whether they considered this as strictly content teachers, or whether they explored this new emerging universe, decided how much they cooperated in that. So sometimes they said to the CLIL coach, okay, the language partner, sorry, they said, fine, I understand this, but you designed the workshop. or let's design it together, or it was a collaborative idea of, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? We need to include this, we need to include that, etc. That kind of idea. And the same with the training. Like Johnny said, one of the first moments of the collaboration was the training experience that the content teachers received. And in terms of their feedback about the training, it was good, but it was too long. Why can't we do it quicker? It would be easier if you just showed us what works and what doesn't work, etc. Whereas on the other extreme, people said, wow, this training was really valuable. It made me see things that I hadn't thought about before. It made me think critically about what I'm doing in my pedagogy, etc. So again, the spectrum, that shows you how people are thinking. And from all of this, we have like this idea of a general perspective of how those teachers valued CLIL, or the collaboration with the language teacher and the process of content and language integrated learning. And I think the summary there is basically, it's either I want a quick fix, help me, and that's it. I continue as I was always doing things. Or the other extreme is like, wow, this made me grow professionally. I'm thinking differently about my discipline, and this idea of developing academic discourse. So like you see, we have 4 columns. Some of them were on one extreme, some were on the other extreme, like in between, depending on what the comments came out. So this gives us an idea about, an initial idea about how content teachers perceived this experience of collaboration in EMI. And we obviously have a lot more to do. Johnny, I don't know if you want to add something there.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, okay. So taking into account what we've explained in terms of systematic implementation at university and some results of our research, there's still more that we have to do in terms of research, but this is like the first ideas that are coming up. That there are some implications of everything that we've talked about here. One of the first questions is this only relevant for universities? Well, I would ask for interaction, but I think you're very shy, so I'm going to carry on. No, it's not. Actually, the research shows there's some very strong exploration of EMI, English as a medium of instruction, or within that CLIL, content and language integrated learning. There's very strong exploration of that in secondary high school. There's many experiences of that. In fact, like the real examples that we have in Colombia, and especially Cali, I suppose all of Colombia, is the bilingual schools, the very strong elite bilingual schools where they do lots of content learning in the new language, which is English. So we're doing this at university, but it doesn't mean that it's only relevant at university. It could be done in any stage of the learning process of students. The point is, obviously, the customization, the type of collaboration, the complexity, everything changes. In university, we're talking about academic discourse because there's a more specific universe of learning in their discipline. But in earlier periods of learning, like in secondary school, high school, maybe there's more general integration, etc. And what do we, at this early stage, what do we think sort of worked, what didn't work? I think you've already noticed this. Institutional support is fundamental, and at SSE, that's been fantastic in that sense, because this was done from a top-down approach, and there was a whole systematic plan for doing this. There have been some experiences of EMI, so doing things in English in Europe and other places, where the institution says to the staff, the faculty, okay, we need more international students, go teach your courses in English, basically. And professors believe that it's simply going to lectures and giving their lecture in English, and that's it. And those experiences in the research, we see that they have failed to some extent. Because the conception of EMI there is very narrow, and although the institution demands it, there isn't a sort of like a systematic planning support idea. But it says here we enjoyed that. So we have the training, the initial training, then we put up our own training idea for our content teachers. We have the language center, which supports students and teachers. We have the collaboration between the content and the language teacher. That was all sort of programmed by the language department. And we have CLIL monitors as well, who specifically dedicate time to CLIL experiences, helping teachers, helping students, etc. So there's a very strong institutional apparatus behind this idea, and that is, in my experience, in my opinion, that's very decisive, because there's like lots of challenges, like Johnny already talked about. But if you have a systematical approach that somehow helps you combat those challenges. And of course, the other idea is the teacher's own sort of conception of learning, teaching, pedagogical experience, because sometimes there are people who just don't want to think bigger, and they're just within their narrow field, and that's all they want to do. So it's very difficult to sort of, modify thinking processes there. The other idea is this, what we already mentioned, between EFL and EAL. The conception of EFL, English is a foreign language and English is an additional language, is very central to this discussion, in my opinion. And it's connected with the English is a lingua franca as well idea. Because if we continue to see English as a foreign language, it's always going to be somebody else's language that is imposed on us for learning. And that entails consequences related to language imperialism. For example, languages being lost, or aspects of languages being lost to native languages because English, takes over, etc. But if I think about English as an additional language, that's very different. I'm thinking, the way I think about it is, it's like adding more to my personality, to my being, because I have a new vision or a parallel vision of the world in a new language. It's very different to thinking about English as being somebody else's language, and I'm made to learn it, or I have to learn it because globalization demands it, because I need to travel, because I'm going to get a better job opportunity, etc. But in English is an additional language. Here, like in the academic discourse, they're developing their professional identity through English, which is a very much more powerful experience in that idea. And in terms of the impact, like we've already said, we're still analyzing the impact. Research has lots of ideas about it works, it doesn't work, it works like this, it works that way, etc. In our case, we've started with the perceptions of the content teachers, and we still need to evaluate student impact. What do the students think about this, etc. That's sort of work in progress for us. But in terms of our own perceptions, or at least my perceptions, I see a lot of value in this, because, like I say, it's not just like adding somebody else's language into the curriculum and then forcing students to learn it just because the world is moving ahead in English. No, here it's about, how do I participate in the world? How do I develop my intercultural competence? How do I develop my professional identity? And how do I interact with all the challenges in this world that we're facing through this new language, without sacrificing my original language, but like creating this new universe of thought and being in a new language. Like I said, adding to my own personality, my way of being, like that idea. I'm sure there are other impacts or implications too, but I think we're running out of time. So those are the key ones that I had in mind. Jody, I don't know if you want to add something.
No, I don't know if you have any questions, and so we'll like to share what we've done. So if you have any questions or comments, or what, you can text or you can talk. Have you ever had the experience of, CLOS or whatever you work in, are they doing anything similar? Teaching disciplinary courses in English? Any questions? Don't worry, don't hesitate. No, any questions welcome, or comment?
But while you're thinking of the questions and comments, if we go back So we go back to the original text. Obviously, esto es un ladrillo. O sea, para mí, I can understand it. I don't think Johnny can either. So we weren't trying to catch you out. The whole point is people can get to this. It's a very complex process, but the language that the person is using in this text is not just general English language. It's a very specific type of English language connected to a specific community of discourse and created through very specific means of learning. So the idea that you didn't understand this, we didn't have many comments, but if you didn't understand this, that's okay, because you're not an insider of that discipline.
Alma Ximena says that, okay, she cannot use the micro, but you can ask the question there. You can type it, no problem.
I don't know.
No, we can't, I guess. So in that case, you can write the question or type it.
Sorry, Alma, I don't know how to give you permission. I don't think I can.
You can speak now. No, yes. Alma, now you can speak.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, first of all. Well, and I don't know if my camera is working. Let me check. No, but anyway.
Fine, we can hear you.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm a social studies teacher in some courses in primary, some courses in secondary school. And I am in agreement with what you said, because sometimes when we're teachers, we are not only teaching, and in this case, not only English or no grammar, but we're including many words that have to do with specific topics, something like that. And sometimes it's difficult to involve students first in understanding the content itself, but also make them and become them familiar with the meaning, with the context. So I know it's pretty complex to teach a specific science using English, but I know it's an effort. And okay, what I want to know, because I know right now you are talking teaching English in higher levels, but I don't know, what do you suggest for involving students probably in these kind of levels in primary and secondary school, if you have any suggestion?
Okay, I'll go first, John. The idea here is more about the conception that this can be done. In CLIL, there is no specific methodology. There's a framework.
Okay.
So if you read CLIL literature, Doyle, Marsh, etc., they have like a procedure that you can follow, but it's not like a method, because every context is different and every audience is different and every need is different in that sense. So they have like a framework, which is called the 4 C's framework. And that helps you sort of see this amalgamation between content and language. Sorry, I'm writing it in the chat so you can have it, the 4 C's framework. And they in their book about CLIL, they show you sort of how to go through the step-by-step idea of thinking about content, culture, cognition, and communication. And this is the amalgamation of content and language, basically. But here, the idea is it's not necessarily just a one teacher job either. So I don't know. I know there are some schools in Cali which have like, I don't know how they call it, transdisciplinary connections. So for example, the language teacher works with the social sciences teacher and the math teacher and I don't know, history teacher, etc. And they do like projects where the student is working on mathematics, on social sciences, on a language as well. So if that kind of a collaboration is possible, that's one approach of doing things. Obviously, the cognitive level of what you're expecting is according to the level of your students. So in university, the cognitive challenge, what we ask students to do is with a higher level is usually, like high, but we also have first semester, second semester students who don't speak a lot of English. So they're like kids, like your kids in a sense as well. So there we still do things, but with a lower cognitive challenge. So it's a progression. During the learning process, they see different elements that slowly take them higher on the cognitive ladder each time, basically. But I recommend having a look at that book. It's okay there, Johnny's written it. CLIL, Marsh and Coyle. And there's another Hood as well, Marsh, Hood and Coyle. There's 4 C's framework. That's an interesting way to think about it. And they give you very good pointers about how to approach this idea of CLIL. Johnny,
and the key there is scaffolding. Scaffolding is the key. How do you get students to do something? So of course you have to guide them through the process. And there's no difficult or complex language, but complex task. You can, with something according to your students' level, you can do something that is pertinent for their level, for the cognitive process and everything. Yes. So that's key, and scaffolding is the key, is how you help them get there. So for example, if you use social science in English, the idea is that they have the chance to develop, obviously the competence in English, the English competence, as well as the disciplinary competence, as they're able to really engage in something meaningful, where they can do something with the language in learn, yes? It's not just learning English from when we talk about, for example, environment, or is how can students express themselves, learn, talk about environmental issues in English, which implies using certain academic discourse. Yeah, that's there, because they start learning about how to express themselves when they're describing this and that. So that's key. And you can actually get in work with very simple activities. The key is not to work with, which is sometimes a mistake, it's just vocabulary, like ecosystem and this. No, it's that they really know what is an ecosystem, how to show it in English with obviously the level that they have at the point. So that's the key, because as Samir says, we have students in level 1 who have no English. Some of them come from public schools where the English is really, really, really low. So as they learn English here, they're able to do something in their courses. So that's pretty much. So thanks for your question, and I hope this is useful for you all. Okay, so this is going to be recorded. So I hope Andrea, once we get all the information, all these videos together, I'm sure we're going to upload it in our memories, and you're going to be able to have access to it if you want to go back to this. If you need anything, you're welcome. We belong to this seminar, and we're doing research and whatever we can do to help you. If you want to know a little bit about this topic, you can send an email. My email is here, so I can share. So if you need anything, we can share bibliography, or we can talk about what you do in your school or university, anything like that. Okay. Your videos is at ICES's YouTube channel. So you go to ICES's YouTube channel and it's there. Thank you, Jose. Okay, so thanks for coming. The idea is that we're gonna meet tomorrow at 8:30. Anyways, Andres gonna send you a reminder later on. For 8:30, you're gonna be with the masters that we offer in at ICESI, so you can get some information if you're interested or just wanna get to know a little bit more about what we're doing here. And at 9:30, we're gonna have the sharing experience with our speakers. We're gonna go deeper in some of the issues that we addressed today, especially the questions that you asked, and other topics that will be interesting. It's gonna be more a conversation. Tomorrow, we want us to share. To talk about our own experiences, so that'll be really interesting. So I want to thank you for being here, and Samir for participating in the event, Jose for your help, of course, and Andreita, obviously, for everything you've been doing. So Fanny, Alma, Carlos, thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Take care.
Bye.